of membership. And so those benefits of membership is what this committee really, really focuses on. We want to make sure that everyone, that's from our young professionals all the way to our CEOs or our executives, have a tangible benefit. Because sometimes it's hard to quantify that, and a lot of us, even with our companies and our organizations, we don't necessarily know how to tie it back to the kind of the benefit of being a part of Comtel. So when we look at, I just want to level set a little bit about the term emerging leader. So some of the conversations I've had since I've been here at this conference, when they talk to folks about emerging leaders, they say, hey, you're focusing on having young professionals become, executives or managers. That's not what this term means at Comtel. All of us, in some capacity, are emerging leaders, right? At all the different levels we're at. So that's as a young professional, that's even as an intern that we have come in our Comtel family, from our tier 1, which is our young professionals, kind of the managers, the senior managers, and even at the executive levels, we're all emerging in our own spaces, right? And that's what our resources are to help us continue to do just that, which is emerge. So at all those different levels, we have project managers, and we focus on resources for our Comtel membership to be able to grow in those spaces. So as our young professionals, you've probably seen some of the webinars that we do where we're just talking about, even before we came to the Comtel National Conference, we had a mentoring webinar. And that was help our young professionals figure out how do you manage and how do you leverage a space like this. We have this many professionals that you can connect with in one space. And that's what that was about. Then we have our tier 2, which is mainly for our managers. Now that's a new space for a lot of people. So they go from being kind of doers on an everyday basis, and now they're managing people. And they have an upline they have to connect with. So that's, we're doing things and putting things in place to help them to understand how to navigate that space. Our tier 3 is our senior managers. Now those are the folks, and everybody may not want to be that executive, but some folks play well in that space. But then there's I'll call it a little bit of a chess match to how do I leverage this senior management role, develop people, and now you're developing not just people, you're developing managers, which means you got to help them to be a lot better at it. And we have project managers that focus on that. And that's when we had our, on LinkedIn, we had a leadership kind of forum on there where we were talking about different topics. We wanted folks to kind of contribute to that and understand how to navigate that space. And then in the past, we've also had for our tier 4, which is our C-suite or our executives levels. Think about this. A lot of even our colleagues are moving into new positions. They're becoming executives of different organizations. They're becoming executives or even VPs and presidents of different organizations and businesses. How do they navigate that space? So in the past, we've had a CEO forum. And I think some of the folks in this room have been a part of that, where that young group of, I call them young, but that new group of executives are now communicating with each other. They're talking about, hey, what are you doing well? Because the point of what we're talking about is when people are emerging into these new spaces, we want them to stay there, right? And now we want them to also stay there. We want them to grow. We want them to continue to move up to these next levels. So that's what the Emerging Leaders title is. It's not just we're working to get young folks into higher positions. We're looking at our Comtel family as a whole. We want to make sure that we're developing each level, and we're communicating with each level, and we're supporting each level. So just wanted to make sure we were there. So you guys understood what we're doing here. So with that, we're going to bring up our sponsor. We're going to bring up Aisha. She'll cover a little bit about our committee, and then we'll go into our forum. Thank you.
Sorrell's kind of tall. I got to bring this down a bit. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you being here. So I have the distinct pleasure of announcing our dedicated committee members. So as Sorrell stated, we have a 4-tier structure, and we have individuals who dedicated their time and their talents to creating programs that benefit the Comtel membership overall. So I'll start with Tier 1, our Young Professionals group. And we have, and if you could just please stand when I call your name, please, so people can kind of see who you all are. I know you all are rock stars, and I appreciate your dedication to this. So Tier 1, we have J.R. Alexander, and he is a transportation manager with Deloitte. Also, Also on Tier 1, we have Whitney Morgan. I'm gonna go through everyone, and you can hold your applause to the end, just in respect for time. But Whitney serves as the Civil Rights and DBE Program Manager for Kansas City Transit Authority, so thank you for that. And last but not least, certainly on Tier 1 is Ms. Kiana McCoy, and she serves as Diversity Specialist for HNTB out of Atlanta. Thank you so much. On Tier 2, we have Ms. Dominique D. Mathis. And Dominique is with Client Services Manager for CERN. Also on Tier 2, she can't be here today, but Ms. Crystal Allen Dallas. So she's busy taking over the world, doing some amazing things, and we miss having her here today. Then we go to Tier 3, Ms. Carita Ducre, who's gonna moderate our panel for today. And Carita will introduce herself soon, but she's out of New Orleans, so I'll let her do that part. Eduardo Mayama. Eduardo is a transportation consultant with Kimley Horn. And then we have Jamal Scobie, senior transportation planner with Foursquare. And holding down Tier 4 is Mr. Ryan Daniel. He's the CEO of St. Cloud Metrobus. Hello, and thank you. And then, so we'll go right into our programming. So again, really appreciate everyone serving on this committee. And I'll introduce our forum sponsor, our gracious forum sponsor, which is Hatch. And representing Hatch today is Ms. Michelle Hyatt to give some opening remarks, and we'll move through the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you to all of you who are here. Welcome. You all are so beautiful. I'm so glad to see you. As she mentioned, my name is Michelle Hyatt, and I am the current Secretary-Treasurer of Compto International. I also stand before you as a representative of Hatch by way of LTK Engineering Services. Hatch is a global Canadian-based engineering and consulting firm, and it specializes in metals, mining, infrastructure, and energy. With its recent merger with LTK Engineering Services, it now specializes in rail vehicle engineering as well as fare collections. Hatch also has been around for going on 70 years, but with its merger with LTK, its legacy now expands back over 100 years. We are very big and very supportive of Compto, and as a matter of fact, LTK Engineering Services has been a staunch supporter of Compto for at least a couple of decades, maybe even longer than that. So we're not going anywhere, and we are really, really happy to be here. I also wanted to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues that are here as well. If you wouldn't mind standing, my colleagues from Hatch. Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful. And I also want to give a special thanks to Natalie Cornell here, as well as Winston Simmons in his absence. They make sure that Hatch or they make sure that Compto is definitely on the radar, not just nationally, but amongst its various dozens of chapters across the United States as well as now Canada. They make sure that Compto gets support from Hatch, previously LTK Engineering Services and now Hatch. So I thank you, each and every one of you, for being here. I also wanted to inform you all, too, that I did say that Hatch is an engineering and consulting firm. And even as LTK, one thing that stands out about this organization is that a client is looking for expertise. They're looking for their consultants to be experts. But Hatch is very big on hiring individuals directly out of college. So that's something that I just wanted you guys to be mindful of. And if you want to see any of my colleagues around, they can tell you a little bit further about that. So thank you so much, each and every one of you, for coming. And we're so glad to be here. Take care.
Okay, I'm back. I forgot a couple very, very, very important things. So as part of how the Compto family supports of each other, in the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee, we also support, or have a part of ours, is the City Intern Committee. So Ms. Colleen Bembry, please stand up. We all know you. You've done a lot of dedicated work for city interns. Did not mean to forget you. And I also did not introduce myself. So I am Aisha Eccleston Bundy. In global supply chain logistics, I have a consulting firm, and I'm working in the electric vehicle space, handling logistics. So that is that. And then one more thing, we can't do what we do without the support of Compto National. So everything we do is supported by National. couldn't do it without them, so I want to say thank you very much to the national staff as well. Gatwiri, April, Olivia, the whole staff, Dante Flood, thank you for what you do every day, but certainly for what you do to support our committee. And with that said, we're going to go directly into our opening address. Thank you again.
Good afternoon, Comto family. Good afternoon. Ooh, that was such a great opening. Thank you, Hatch LTK, for sponsoring the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee Forum at the 2022 National Meeting and Training Conference. As you heard earlier, my name is Kiana McCoy, and I am so thrilled to address this amazing group. Whew, it is so great to be in the room with my Comto family and in person. Aaron Davis, my Atlanta chapter president, often reminds us that Comto is a family, and I am feeling the love here in Fort Lauderdale. Clap one more time if you are happy to be here with your Comto family. So, why are we here? We are at a unique and transformative moment with regards to the transportation industry. This confluence of events brings us to a pivotal point, a perfect storm that can sway what the future of transportation looks like. Recent passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is set to provide $550 billion in new spending on our nation's infrastructure over the next 5 years. Let me repeat that for the folks in the back. $550 billion in new spending, and will add an average of 1.5 million jobs each year for the next decade. I'm gonna repeat that for the folks on the front. 1.5 million jobs each year for the next decade, according to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. This influx of funding and job growth will change how we move and how we transport goods across the country and around the world. We are moving into a new phase in transportation. Autonomous vehicles are no longer relegated to episodes of the Jetsons or your favorite sci-fi movie or TV show. They are in our cities and at our airports. Electric vehicles have provided environmentally friendly options for transit systems to move riders. We are seeing automation on toll roads and highways, making travel faster and safer. On-demand ride services such as Lyft and Uber have changed the way we move around cities and towns, creating flexibility for riders who travel places not accessible by traditional public transit options. With all this innovation comes a new workforce. 2 years ago, coronavirus forced us into quarantine and shifted our outlook on how we collaborate and deliver services in the industry. Zoom, WebEx, and Teams became familiar outlets for collaboration, and I think you're on mute. Or, sorry, I was on mute. Tied for the most used business phrase of the year, according to humanresourcesonline.net. What we did learn, however, was to adapt and think outside the box to continue delivering services to our communities for public agencies and to state, municipal, and other clients for consultants. As we look to return to the office, how do we marry traditional work elements with innovations made in virtual environments? 2021 surfaced a new phenomenon, the Great Resignation, bringing a time of uncertainty in our industry as people rejected traditional work environments in favor of hybrid or fully remote work landscapes. How do we cultivate corporate culture and influence professional growth in this new landscape? The new generation of transportation professionals will enter the industry in an employees market. Employers are waging a war for access to the best and brightest talent to attract to an industry that, let's be honest, is not very sexy. It's not. But we are not going away. So here's the $550 billion question. How do we attract the next generation of professionals in our efforts to advance transportation? More importantly, how do we retain the next generation of professionals as we advance the transportation industry beyond disruption? This question is not a new one, nor is it a question that hasn't been asked each time our industry has come to a similar state of affairs. What makes this moment unique is that we have a voice to influence the direction of our future. That voice is Comto. Our experts today will share insight on 3 main areas that can foster growth and continue the development of transportation professionals, creating the next generation of industry leadership. The first is mentoring, and there has been a lot of discussion around mentoring. If you really think about it, mentoring is a 360-degree activity. We mentor up, we mentor down, and at a peer level. If you follow the Comto Emerging Leaders Subcommittee, our Tier 1 led an engaging conversation on mentorship a few weeks ago, setting the stage for today's discussion. Our panel will discuss how mentoring has and continues to evolve in environments where people only interact virtually, and how mentoring has aligned with the industry's newfound focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next is succession planning. Let me take a quick poll. Raise your hand if you plan to work forever.
Forever.
Okay. So we have 2 people who plan to work forever. Now, raise your hand if, at some point in your life journey, you plan to transition from a 40-plus hour work week to focus on personal goals and experiences. Okay. So, based on that response, how do we ensure that this industry continues to thrive and its professional workforce continues a pattern of growth and leadership development in a changing workspace environment? Because let's be real. Folks want to retire. Those 2 who raising hands, they for real want to retire. Our panel will talk about the importance of planning for the future workforce now and best practices to identify and develop successors while ensuring the transfer of knowledge as people move into their post-professional phases of life. That's fancy for retirement. Communicating your organization's mission and long-term vision to your workforce and future professionals is critical to the success of your firm. The ability to align an employee's personal values and professional ambitions with an organization's mission and vision creates a win-win partnership between you and your workforce. This means that your employees' buy-in is critical to future success. Finding future employees who can flow into alignment is crucial to maintaining the quality of your organization's services. Our panel will discuss how firms can manage this buy-in process and how employees, from CEOs to interns, can influence the success of any team through this win-win partnership. If there is one thing I would like for you to take from today's conversation, it is this: be passionate with a purpose. We all have a passion for something. My 2 passions are developing the next generation of transportation professionals and beer. This lady loves her craft beer. However, passion can birth tons of great ideas, but leaves little for execution. Be passionate with a purpose. Make sure you are driving your passions toward tangible outcomes and that you leave a positive imprint for others who share your passions. Transportation is not a phase or a fad. This industry is in constant motion. People will always have somewhere to go or have a need for something, and this industry will always be the solution to that problem via roads, highways, airplanes, ships, trucks, cars, and public transit systems. Our purpose is to make sure that this country, this world, continues to move. Our passion for transportation is what brought us to Compto and inspires us to serve both locally and on a national level. So be passionate with the purpose, and let's continue to move the nation. Now I will turn it over to Karita Ducray, who will be our moderator for today's discussion. Thank you.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Thanks a lot, Kiana. Can y'all see me okay? I'm short, so if I stand, you probably won't be able to see me behind the podium. Okay. Thank you for that applause and for so many of you showing up for this panel. It's really appreciated. Really quickly, I'm Karita Ducray. I'm a managing partner and senior consultant with a boutique management consulting firm called Insight Strategies. Our headquarters is in Southern California. We also have an office in New Orleans, and that's the office that I run. Where's my New Orleans contingent? Whoop, whoop, New Orleans, thank you. All right, Dee, all right, Adonis, all right. Insight specializes in organizational development, learning and development, executive coaching, succession planning, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what I really want to do is introduce you to this esteemed panel and let you know a little bit more about the folks that have volunteered their time to talk with you about this really important topic. So I'm going to start over at the far end with my friend Whitney Morgan over there. Whitney, let me flip my page here. Whitney is the Civil Rights and DBE Program Manager in Kansas City at KCATA. And what I'd like to tell you, right, because all four of these panelists have years of experience in transit and transportation, and I don't need to read their resumes to you. Instead, what I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about each one's superpower. Whitney, if you know him, you know that his superpower is he sees a problem, he communicates the problem, he takes action to solve the problem, right? That is his superpower. So I'll give you a quick example of how he's done that. He recently drafted the MBE and WBE program for KCATA. It was the first of its kind ever at the transit agency, and he got that approved by the Board of Commissioners. He got the Board of Commissioners to extend the SBE pilot program into a permanent program that's going to have the ability to set aside any project with federal funding up to $1 million. He's worked with KCATA leadership to create the Civil Rights Department. He created the department that he now runs, right? He's the immediate past president of the Kansas City chapter of Compto, and he's also a 2020 recipient of the Reverend Jerry Moore President's Leadership Award. So thank you, Whitney, for being here. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my good friend, Adalie LeGrand. Adalie is the Chief Executive Officer at Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority, or HART. I've known Adalie for a few years. I think her superpower is strategy, development, and implementation. And I'll give you a little bit to back that up. So before becoming the CEO at HART, she was the Chief Strategy Officer in service to the New Orleans Regional Transit Authority, where her responsibilities included developing the first strategic mobility plan for the New Orleans region, Before coming to New Orleans, she worked in Atlanta. She was the Chief Mobility Officer for the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority, or ATL. And again, her job there was strategic in nature. It was to develop a strategic plan, strengthen partnerships with key stakeholders to move that plan forward. So thank you for being here, Adelie. Flora Castillo is the president of Pivot Strategies. Flora's superpower is she is a leadership development guru. She is like the leadership whisperer. And I'm going to prove it to you because I want to tell you she is the first Latina who is elected chair of the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA. While she was the chair of APTA, she established APTA's Emerging Leaders Program, which continues to this day. She is a champion for workforce and talent development. She also co-founded Latinos in Transit. Where's the LIT people in the room? Whoop, whoop. And when she worked at New Jersey Transit, she helped to create their first ever Transit Academy Workforce Awareness and Readiness Program. So thank you, Flora. And last but certainly not least, I want to introduce you to Euless Cleckley. Euless is the director and CEO of Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works. I haven't known Euless all of that long, but looking at his bio, I was like, you know what your superpower is? I just told him, your superpower is getting stuff done in government. I mean, it's hard enough to get stuff done, let alone get it done in government, right?
That is true.
It is true. So he has a history of working for transit and transportation organizations in Houston and DC and in Denver. At Denver, he was the executive director of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure for the city and county of Denver. He led the creation of that department, which then he became the executive director of, in case you're seeing a pattern here. And now he is in Miami, where he is running Department of Transportation and Public Works, which is the 15th largest public transit system in the country, and it is also one of the largest departments in Miami-Dade County. So thank you, Euless. And now we want to get to know a little bit about you. So I have a question for you. I want you to think about the topic that we're here to talk about, succession planning, mentoring, and professional development. And in that lens, I want to ask you, raise your hand if your organization has had turnover at the leadership level, let's say in the past 5 years. Raise your hand. Wow, that's an enormous part of the room, a big percentage. Raise your hand if you've seen, especially in the last 2.5 years since the pandemic began, if you've seen turnover at the leadership level. Right. So we're here because there is a need, right? Yesterday, if any of you attended Ken and Greg's presentation, are Ken and Greg in the room? If you attended Ken and Greg's presentation on the Great Resignation, they asked everyone, how many of you are experiencing turnover? And a lot of people raised their hand. How many of you are having trouble attracting employees to your organization? A lot of people raised their hand. And then they said, well, what's the biggest issue with attracting people to your organization? The number one answer yesterday in the room was pay. So what's the secret? The secret is, why don't we try to hold on to the people that we have, right? Why don't we grow from within our own talent to move into these positions? And sometimes, what does that mean? Sometimes that means creating the job that you want to have, right? So we're here to hear from this wonderful panel, and I just want to start really quickly with just some shared definitions. When we talk about mentoring, we're talking about that formal or informal relationship, right, with another person where you are seeking from them their knowledge and their experience to help guide you in your career. When we talk about professional development in this context, we're not really talking about operations training. What we are talking about is professional leadership development. So what are some of those leadership skills and competencies? And then succession planning. A lot of organizations don't have a formal succession plan or succession planning program in place. I want to encourage you to consider looking at that program where you are intentionally identifying people for succession in your organization and then giving those people the knowledge and skills and abilities that they need to be able to take over as these leaders continue to retire from the industry. So with that in mind, I'd love to throw my first question to Adelie. And Adelie, I just want to know a little bit about what your organization is doing in this space of succession planning, mentoring, or professional development, and not just at Hart. I know you've been there for about 2 years now, but even prior to Hart.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone again, and Karita, thank you for the opportunity. And so to jump right in, what I say is that we're all aware that there's a lot of, I would say, disruption going on in our industry, but the reality is this happened before COVID, right? So we knew before COVID that we were having some issues with ridership, with attracting and retaining employees, and what were we calling it at that time? I think it was the silver tsunami. Everybody was going to retire, and we had no one to fill those vacant positions. I think between that time and then COVID and where we are today, in addition to, folks wanting more money or feeling disconnected or not really sure what the future holds, from my experience, from where I'm sitting currently specifically, there seems to be this lack of understanding of where the organization is going and how you really fit into the organization. So for us at Hart, what we started doing, especially during COVID and coming out of it slowly, we are in Florida, so I guess we've been out of COVID a little longer than most. But that being said, we've been doing a lot of internal, I would say, engagement. I'm fortunate today to have several of the folks of my executive team in the room, so if you guys don't mind raising your hands and saying, hey. So there we have 3 of the executive team members here in the room with me today, and what we started doing is really focusing on internal engagement. And that might sound kind of wonky, but we have engaged with all sectors of the organization, 4 different shifts, and actually have had real public meetings with our internal team. With over, Ms. Kirk, was it like 20 boards? With over like 20 boards and easels and having all the directors there and really talking to everyone from bus operators, mechanics, to accountants and planners to really help them to understand our budget process. What's going into the budget? How much money do we have? Where are we going to have a gap? We're going to be short, 20% of our budget next year. What does that mean? How does that impact you? To really help people to understand what it means to be a part of the organization and how things work. I think before you can start talking about a plan on mentoring and succession planning and your professional development, if you don't know who you are in the organization, what the organization actually does, how does the funding find its way from, a taxpayer paying their tax bill to getting into your check? How do we fund buying more buses? I think there really needs to be more emphasis on educating our workforce so, one, they understand what the words mean, right? We did a quick definition on what mentoring means and what succession planning means, but do people know what ad valorem tax means? Do they know, what we're talking about when we're at board meetings saying that we have to go after additional funding? Do they know the difference between capital dollars and operating dollars? So these are some of the areas that we've been focusing on internally. And I think, and we've heard feedback from the employees, that it's been very helpful. We're on our 3rd round of these sessions. We have another one, I think, in 2 weeks where we're going to talk about amendments to our budget and really just getting the employees engaged in the process and giving them a voice and some ownership. But in addition to that, we are looking at, we're in the process of developing a strategic plan, and that was another one of our internal engagement processes to have the entire organization talk about our future and where they see themselves in the future and what types of engagements and opportunities and projects do they want to see us implement. And going through that process, then they can start seeing where they would like to see themselves next. So that's, I would say, number 2. And then number 3, we are working closely with our new Chief Strategy Officer, who is in the room with us today, to really put together a plan on how we take our strategic plan and align it with succession planning so that we are building positions that we need today, as well as identifying positions that we'll need in 10 and 20 years so that the workforce can be a part of that transition. So we're in baby steps with step number 3, but we feel like this is the best approach for us, and really what's most important is having the employees, the entire organization, a part of the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Adelie. I don't know if you were listening as closely as I was, but what I heard is know the organization, know where the funding is coming from, know how the money is being spent, right? And I'm going to ask you in a little while how many of you in the room are interested in moving into leadership roles. That was gold right there, right, in terms of preparing yourself and getting yourself ready for that. So thank you so much. I have a question about things that your organization is doing creatively. And Whitney, can I throw this one at you? What is your organization doing creatively right now to get people ready for advancement?
So we have we have a few different programs that we implement publicly and internally. So for example, externally, we have an unsolicited proposal program. So if you're a vendor or a small business and you see something that we need as an agency, you can actually submit an unsolicited proposal and we could actually help you get work that way. Internally, not really any specific programs or anything like that, but we do have the ability to do what you mentioned earlier, which is create departments. So there's been 3 different individuals within the agency that saw an issue or saw a problem, developed a plan of action, brought that plan of action to our leadership, to our board of commissioners, developed a budget, developed job descriptions, and a succession plan, as she mentioned, a strategic plan. How are we going to do this? And then actually have gotten that implemented and approved within the program. So to give you perspective, I was in an entry-level position, right? But I always saw myself as more than that. But the pathway I was on, there wasn't a lot of, positions above that. So are you just going to sit there and be stuck in that position forever or move on to a new company? Or you can actually create the job or the department that you want, and so you have to get buy-in from your leadership. You have to create value, show your value, and then you can write your own check with the agency at that point because you've shown so much value that they can't let you go.
Love that. Show so much value. Okay, so go ahead, applaud. There you go. Social media, hashtag show so much value that they can't let you go. All right, love it. Thank you, Whitney. Flora, what are you seeing? You're a nationwide consultant. What are you seeing out there that organizations are doing creatively to help advance people?
And thanks for the opportunity too, Karita, for being here with my esteemed panelists. Actually, before I answer that question, Valerie, if you can stand up, I want to talk to you next. She's the only one out of the 2 that said that she was going to work forever, right? I happen to be on her board. I'm her past chair, so we have an issue. I'll talk to the current chair to see what we need to do to coach and cancel you. But so what I'm seeing a lot, especially since as Adelie mentioned, a lot of this work was ongoing. But what I think has been a pivot for us was the untimely killing of George Floyd and the renewed focus on just doing the right thing, right? Looking at equity. And so for me, I'm seeing a lot of focus on mentoring programs. Really focusing on leveraging a lot of these, programs that a lot of the trade industry groups have, like the Emerging Leaders Program. It's really renewing to see and to hear CEOs talk about and tell me that, hey, listen, Flora, I'm spending money to send people to be enrolled in these leadership programs. That might not sound like innovative to you, but in the private sector, that's kind of a normal practice. In what I've seen in the 26 years or so that I've been in this space is something that we've never really leveraged. So it's great to hear CEOs to say, you know, I have 10 people here. We want them to be active. We want them to participate in committees, take more leadership roles in these associations, because when you're not able to leverage the internal resources for talent development, they can certainly leverage programs like this. I've seen how some of those, pilots get created. I happen to sit on a couple of nonprofit and for-profit boards, and it is a work in progress. I think it's great to see that entities and leaders are willing to take the risk because it's not something that is non-negotiable anymore. I happen to work with a client in Philadelphia, SEPTA, and they have done a lot of work in just leveraging some of their past internal leadership developments and now transitioning to be more intentional, focusing on expanding and strengthening their ERGs. At SEPTA, they have a trades women program, Women in Transit, and they're really redoubling their efforts to look at how you can leverage the best practices right now to continue to get people ready to move into those supervisors, managers, directors role. And so that's what I see so far.
If you're not familiar with that acronym, ERG is Employee Resource Group. So a lot of organizations, they might also be called affinity groups, right? So again, sounds like an opportunity, if your organization has an ERG, an opportunity for you to showcase your talents, getting involved in one of those. And if your organization does not have ERGs, sounds like an opportunity to start one. So I'm glad that you're experiencing CEOs who are open and receptive to the idea of sending people to training. In addition to the APTA Emerging Leaders Training that Flora helped to start, Latinos in Transit also has training, and WTS is also doing a training this October. So the opportunities are certainly there. Ulyss, can I throw this question to you as well? What are you seeing creatively?
Sure, I'd like to get in on this. Can y'all hear me? Very, very good. So thanks again for the invitation, and it's really great to see this crowd and so many people that I've worked with in the past, so it's been great. I just want to step back for 1 second, because I think sometimes we start to get into tactics a little bit around this topic. At the end of the day, this boils down to culture that gets created for organizations, and it always starts at the top. So, Adelie and myself, we're running organizations. Flora, you talked about the fact that CEOs and directors have to be open to these concepts. At the end of the day, the frustration a lot of people have is the support from executive management. And if we're going to be serious about this as we get into leadership positions, either in public transit, public transportation industry organizations, or even in your individual firms, whether or not you have 1 or 2 people working for you or working by yourself, the tone of the culture starts with you. I would encourage everybody as we start talking about this conversation to understand that none of this stuff gets done without having the supportive culture. And there's a responsibility for those that are in leadership positions to adopt a culture of expectation that you're there for the people that report to you. So before you start talking about projects, programs, and services, the first P that's important are the people. And it's the staff is the most valuable asset that any organization has. So in terms of some of the innovative approaches, and I'll harken back to my Denver days. I've been in Miami-Dade for less than a year. We are very focused on especially succession planning, which really succession planning is about identifying good talent, making sure that you're preparing that talent so that talent can protect the department from inevitably from going into dysfunction or disarray. That's really what succession planning is. But what we did in Denver, and I'm going to shout out Marsha Nelson. Can you stand up? Yes, stand up, Marsha. So Marsha, along with James Fisher, where are you, James? James is in the back waving his hand with the pink sport coat on. I don't know how you got that. But so James actually came down with me, served as my chief of staff in Denver. And then Marsha, we hired Marsha away from a large construction company to help run our equity program. But the equity program is broader than just, your traditional quote-unquote equity focus. We created this program called 444. 444, and it's not the Jay-Z album 44. It's 444, right? And the whole idea is we wanted to step back and get into the pipeline of talent much earlier than what you would expect, because which we oftentimes don't think about. So the 444 program is really identifying ways, starting in the 4th grade, every 4 years, having a touch point with that child, so they can have a 40-year career in transportation. So that's how we got the 444. So if you really think about the 4th grade, you're around 10 years of age. Every 4 years, so you go 10 to 14 to 18. 18, you have opportunities for internships, and you've already cultivated that relationship with that child, and they understand the benefit of this industry and how impactful it is. After 18 is 22. Get my math right. So hopefully some people graduate from college around 22. So then you have an opportunity to come into the workforce. And then from that particular point in time, we want to make sure that we're providing that pipeline for 40 years of a good, successful career. So that 444 program was unique. We ended up doing this during the pandemic, where we actually partnered with the Colorado Association of Black Professional Engineers, CABES, and ended up teaching virtually around 25 to 30 students in the 4th grade about transportation and city building. And then ended up taking that group out to actually show them an actual project where we installed a bike lane. It's Denver, everybody likes bike lanes. So we installed a bike lane, and they saw what we taught them in the classroom actually in the field. And so, that's a unique program, but it's gonna yield some results because we've already planted a seed with the youth, and then eventually they will be an opportunity to become leaders in the industry, and we don't have to wait until somebody actually is in a position where they discover this industry as an opportunity to have a career. So that's just one innovative tool.
It's the 444. So Euless, you mentioned the pandemic, and I did want to ask about the impact that the pandemic had on organizational succession planning, mentoring, and professional development efforts. Was there an impact? And if there was an impact, what was that impact? So I'll ask you if you would speak to that first, and then any of the other panelists, I'd love to hear the impact of the pandemic on your organization's efforts as well.
Yeah, I do think that the pandemic challenged all of us, not only with respect to how you deliver your projects, programs, and services, but the change in the mindset for the employees, I think, was impacted. And I think we lost a lot of time over the past couple of years. I am not I'm trying to be diplomatic, I am not in favor nor all that receptive of people staying at home and working from home. Before the pandemic, I was not. Now, during the pandemic, I had to change my mindset because I saw, when I was in Denver, I saw actually that folks were productive. Now, being down in Miami-Dade, we are still kind of in a hybrid situation, and Denver is a hybrid kind of schedule situation. But the one piece that is missing is the day-to-day interaction with the staff and that face-to-face time that you can have, particularly if you're trying to groom leaders. And there's a difference between a manager and a leader, and what happens is that managers, they are useful in their particular role, but a manager is transactional, which means that you're focused more on process and bureaucracy and a short-term vision, as opposed to being a leader, which is focused on people and a long-term strategy to help develop an organization or a group or a unit that you're part of. And so what I've seen is that the lack of the day-to-day face time has defaulted to a lot of transactional approaches to human interaction, as opposed to having folks in the office interacting with each other so you can help cultivate that individual so they can be a leader. So If it's about people, you can't only have the opportunity to interact with people online and on Zoom. They have to be in person. And those of us who run transit agencies, much of our staff, they didn't have the opportunity to work from home. So I would say that's the one risk that came out of it. I think there are benefits and drawbacks. At some point, we need to get back in the office, don't you think? So, thank you for those 17 claps, but thank you, Greg. There you go. See, thank you. There's the Miami days over there, and we're
So, well, let me throw this out though for consideration. Has there been any positive or surprising impact that the pandemic has had on succession planning or mentoring or professional development? And what I mean by that, when I say surprising or positive, maybe there was somebody who wasn't on your radar screen, who in the course of the pandemic was able to show their change management skills and their adaptability and their positivity and their technical knowledge, right? Maybe there was someone who thrived because the pandemic gave them an opportunity to show skills that you would not have seen if it were not for that crisis. So I'll ask all of the panelists, have there been any surprising or positive impacts from the pandemic in this space?
Karita, I'll jump in there. I say yes. I mean, Euless made a lot of great points on why we should return to all the way full back to work, but I'm on a hybrid schedule, and many of you also may be on a hybrid schedule, and many of you may reside in a large metropolitan area with a lot of traffic and a long commute to your job or to your employment. So when you work from home, many of us spend too much time on email or work longer than our actual 8-hour day. So instead of doing that, you can utilize that time that you used to commute for yoga or for reading because leaders are readers, or for working out because health is wealth. And that's part of professional development because
Hashtag leaders are readers.
Because the way I look at professional development is not just, technical skills, because if you have 10 applicants for a job, they all can do the job, but who's the leader, who stands out? And these are the types of things that you do to stand out, in my opinion.
Love that answer. Adelie?
This is a very interesting conversation. I spent most of my time on the private sector side, so working remotely is really not a new concept. I spent a good year and a half or so working for a firm that was in the south of France called Cityway, and 90% of my colleagues were in France. So our meeting started at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning so that we could all be on a call together while they were ending their day and I was starting my day. It worked because we had a structure that was established and we all pretty much worked from different places around the globe, and we worked together, and we all pretty much had the same type of job. The challenge being in a transit space, and I would also say depending on what type of transportation you work in, if it's a DOT, it might be a little different if you're not, someone who's in the field, but in the transit space, at least from where I'm sitting, you have people who have to show up every single day. And when you talk about building a culture, how do you build a culture? And we talk about equity, right? Floyd talked about George Floyd, but before that, it was Trayvon Martin, and before that, we can always go before that, right? How do you build a culture of equity and inclusion where you're designing a system where there's one segment of the population, of the workforce, who does not ever have to come to work? Right? And maybe it works, maybe you can do it, but what I can say right now is in building this culture, right, we have an immediate need, and our immediate need is trying to retain and attract people into our space. And we want to build a culture where people feel like they're included and they understand why we do the work we do, how the dollars flow, all of the stuff I talked about before, right? And then we're going to tell them at the same time. But some people, because they went to college or they have this credential, they get to do their job from home. But the rest of you have to get up and get on a bus and deal with the public who have challenges. And you have to, get up and be, at the yard when it's still dark outside to refuel buses, and you have to make sure you clean the buses because there was a bio spill, and you have to, so all of those things that have to happen, but we're going to tell them, we expect you to be here all the time, we expect you to deal with the problematic public sometimes, but the rest of us are going to come in when we feel like coming in. Maybe it can work for other people, and maybe you can put a plan in place, and maybe you'll be able to develop a culture that is very supportive and embraces that. And I think if you do that, maybe you can come on the panel and share with others how you made that work. But for right now, I would say, and I'd have to agree with the previous Euless, because I think you've been converted, you said, that, it is important to have folks understand
holy water on
that
it.
we need to be present. Right? And what I would say, there's always a little asterisk with the footnote. It's up to the supervisor to define what being present looks like, right? So it's not like everything has to be the same in every department. But from a leadership perspective, I do think it's important to mirror what you expect from the larger organization. And at least for me and my organization, 2/3 of my workforce is in the union, and they're expected to be at work every day. So, again, there have been some opportunities for additional training, and you can go on Zoom and learn how to change a bus tire, I don't know. But, there are trainings on Zoom, but I think people learn more from being in a space with people. So maybe you have the online training, but then you have to reinforce it in person. And you have to, you can teach yourself how to bake a cake online, but if you never, actually buy flour and sugar and, make it happen, you don't know how to bake a cake, right? So there's work to be done. Nothing is perfect, but we have a lot of opportunities to figure out the way forward.
Thank you. Laura?
I think I want to hone in on the opportunity in concept because, like you, Adelie, I got a chance, after always being in an office, got a chance to be a full-time telecommuter when I transitioned to United Healthcare. And I was at the stage in my career where I didn't need to be in the office to be seen, right, to make those connections. So there is a great opportunity for us within the public transportation space to sort of look at what functions, right, can and cannot be. And I think that's where, we're on that journey right now to identify the flexibility, something that we need to keep top of mind. I also do want to comment on the impact on related to mentorship. With our just recently graduated Emerging Leaders Program, one of the innovative concepts that we embedded in that program was the ability to have an internal and an external mentor be assigned to each of the participants. And what they've tell and have shared with me is that being able to have those mentoring sessions virtually really work for them, and it actually increased the access, made it more personable. If you recall, you could actually see your dog in the background, right? So you heard your children coming in, and so that really made it more human in terms of the engagement, and the level of empathy, I think, was also a byproduct of that. And so, it's really good to be able to see that we can actually leverage those type of,
More of a human connection, right, because of that vulnerability, and
And I think the fellows also were really grateful to be able to have someone just care about them, to say, how are you doing? Are you okay? And that means a lot in terms of just their ongoing well-being.
Well, this is an excellent conversation. I did want to ask about the impact of your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and programs on succession planning and mentoring and professional development, and organically we got there. So, Euless, you want to give the last word on that particular topic?
Well, I just wanted to kind of go back to what the question was. Because the question was really about leadership and mentoring, right? And so I think one of the most important aspects, Adelie's point, is as leaders, you're expected to be available and present. And again, I do appreciate the hybrid schedule piece. I do appreciate it. I do. But at the end of the day, we're talking about developing emerging leaders to take over roles that people expect you to be available and show yourself and show up. And so you can't always do that on Zoom. You can't always do that on, what's the other one? Microsoft Teams and all that. So I think that's what we're saying. And then particularly when we talk about showing up and being present for somebody that you are mentoring, you can have a designer shirt that's made by Denise from The Cosby Show, but it's still not that designer shirt. So somebody, yeah. You get what I'm saying, Flora?
You're aging yourself right now.
All right. So I'll leave it at that. That's the last one.
Garden Gartrell.
It's called Gordon Gartrell. Okay, call it there.
So I want to circle back a little bit to something that came up earlier. We were talking about the competencies that are important as we start to look ahead and move forward. And I have a question for the audience. Raise your hand if you feel that, not now, but sometime within the next 5 years, that you will be ready for a leadership position or a higher level leadership position than the one you're currently in. Raise your hand. All right, put your hands down. What about you feel like you're going to be ready in the next 1 to 3 years? Okay, about as many hands. Raise your hand if you feel like I'm ready now. I am ready now to move into a leadership role. Okay, wow, interesting. Okay, good. So my question for the panelists is, what are the competencies that you believe, and when I say competencies, I'm talking about leadership competencies, right? Professional competencies. What are the competencies that you would say someone needs to have who is ready now, who will be ready in 1 to 3 years, or who will be ready in about 5 years? What should they be working on developing? Adelie?
Okay, so first and foremost, I want to thank my members of the C team for not raising your hand that you want a higher position in a year. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, you know, it depends on what the level is. So I would say my CFO, Ms. Loretta Kurt, who has been a Compto member for a great 42 years. Thank you, Ms. Kirk. So let's give her a round of applause. And I am fortunate, and I would say this, about the mentoring piece and what you need. Sometimes we look for a structured, formalized mentoring opportunity, right? You want somebody to write down on a piece of paper, I'll be your mentor, call me at this time, and I'll help you along your way. But sometimes you miss opportunities because you don't allow yourself to be fully present in every engagement and learn from every situation and allow mentoring to happen as a continuous process. I would say that, for me, I can't say I had someone who was specifically assigned to me as a mentor. I came from the school of sitting in the back of the room and listening to conversations and hearing people. In most cases, being invisible was actually my special power because as a black woman in the engineering space, most times people didn't even recognize I was in the room. But I used that power to understand how decisions were made, who was in, who was on their way out. You'll be amazed how many things people say while you're sitting right in the room as if you're not there. But that helped me to navigate the space. And I share that to say that, and not to put Ms. Kirk on the spot, but I got this job in Tampa and I needed a CFO. And I reached out to Ms. Kirk and John Henry, who's sitting next to her, who's the CFO at APTA, and asked them to sit on the interview panel because I'm not a CFO, and I don't know if someone's telling me the truth or not. I have no idea. I'm an engineer, I don't know that stuff. So they sat on the panel, and they helped me go through the process, and we went through a couple of rounds. We didn't find any candidates that were great, and I went to Ms. Kirk, and I said, you know, are you willing to help me out for 90 days? And she said, sure, no problem. And it's been like a year, but I always restart the clock after, you know, day 91, it starts at 1 again. So she's on 90 days a couple of times. But, you know, I say this to say the competencies are, you know, for the specific job, you have to understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, right? And that's why I gave that example. I know transit from an engineering and project management perspective. I'm not a CFO. I don't know finances. I know how to do a P&L, you know, review and all of that, but it's not the same as being a CFO of a transit agency. I knew that that was an area that I was deficient. Ms. Kirk and I sat on a board together. I never worked with her in the past, didn't really know her that well. She was on the board. We were in meetings once, you know, a couple of times a year. But from my relationship, I felt comfortable that I could talk to her and find a way to move forward. Understand your strengths, your weaknesses, and your network, right? So if you're ready to make the next step, if those of you who raised your hand and said you're ready now, there should be somebody in the position that you are interested in occupying, that you have a relationship with today, that you can pick up the phone after this session, don't do this right now, and call them and say, you know, I'm interested in making this next step, and these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. I'd like to talk with you and figure out how I can move forward. You are your number one and really only advocate for what you have to offer. You might have a headhunter or somebody, they don't care about you, they care about the check. Just keeping it 100. You have to advocate for yourself, build your network, and reach out to the right folks so that you understand what it's really going to take to assume that role. So that's just my experience.
Thank you so much for that. We are running a little bit short on time. Yeah, go ahead and applaud. Yeah. I do want to make sure that we have about 10 minutes to field some questions from the audience. Do you have any questions for our panelists? If you do, please stand up, introduce yourself with your name, your organization, and just project, please, because it's a big room. Oh, yeah, really? Yes, please, thank you.
I would mention, as a young professional, sitting next to CEOs and partners and organizations, utilize LinkedIn. Utilize LinkedIn for sure in terms of being strategic and setting up relationships. Copy the right cat. Adelie mentioned, you know, having a mentor relationship, but what if you want someone to be your mentor and they're too busy or they don't really want to do it or they don't really have time for you? You can still copy the right cat from afar. I could consider a Freddie Fuller a mentor and he have no idea, right? Because I can follow his footsteps. As she mentioned, follow someone who's actually done it. Not the title, not hoping and wishing, somebody who's actually done what you want to do, something you're passionate about. So copy the right cat.
I would say, I think for me, I've always seek and call people out all the time, just to say hello, how you doing? That's just part of who I am, And, you know, I often offer my services to just, you know, mentor and coach and connect, right? I'm a connector. I love to use my Rolodex to help someone, just to have a conversation with someone like Adelie, right? If they're thinking about being a CEO. So for me, that's something that I do each and every, you know, every day, if I can. The other thing I would say is, I am accessible. Whenever I'm here at a conference, I always make time, because you just never know who actually, some people are afraid. They think that if you're a board member or if you're a CEO that you can't be, you know, you can't reach out. And I think that that's also is a barrier many a times. And always ensure that, you know, sometimes individuals, people of color like us get asked to present or be in a situation where it could be a risky situation, right? If you don't have the right type of support and mentoring. So always being able to, I make that a priority, because I want them to show up in their best self, right? Even if you're being part of a town hall meeting, right, and you have a speaking role, but you've never spoken, right? How you present yourself, how, you know, what kind of like, you know, outfits you wear, that all matters and goes to your brand, right? You want to always protect your brand.
Yeah. Great addition. Yes, sir. Hi, Robert.
One thing I have not heard about becoming a leader, and I'm someone old school, worked in the office and so forth, but as I was going from engineering to business and now running my own firm for the last 20+ years, I always look for people that want to make my job easier as a CEO. It's important. If I have someone working for me who doesn't want to make my job easier, then I'm going to get stressed, and that rolls off in the organization. So as we look to be leaders, also look at how you can support someone else, and always ask, hey, what can I do for you? 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, how to make your job, the CEO's job, boss's job easier. Very basic question that I learned in my early days of engineering. So consider that with all the other programs. But basically, how do you make someone else's job easier?
I don't think there's a leader up here who wouldn't appreciate someone coming up to them with that with that question. How do I make your job easier, right?
You see, there was no applause for that. So I don't know what to do.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Aida Abdul-Berry, LA Metro. Aida.
And this has been just a wonderful panel discussion. And I understand both views in terms of teleworking or hybrid schedule and all that, and it's been beneficial in different ways. But I'm also an instructor for the National Transit Institute, NTI. I run a college.
Woohoo, NTI.
I've been teaching the Title VI and public transit course for the last 6 years. And over the pandemic, we had to switch to virtual training. And I can tell you that I have seen more and more operators and
Yes.
superintendents joining our courses online and them getting the benefit of that training. So from that standpoint, I think it's been really beneficial. And for our operators to get that training that is so needed, not just being on the bus, and also them understanding what their role is when those services are being redesigned, that the input that operators and operations has with working with the planners can make things so much better.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out.
Aida, thank you so much for a shout out to NTI. I know Billy Terry is here and the rest of his team is here as well. I have a question over here, and we only have a couple minutes left, so I may not be able to get to everyone's questions. The good news is, as soon as this panel is over, we're going to go right out those double doors for a reception. So you will still have an opportunity to interact. Yes, sir.
So my name is Deshaun Quinn. I'm
Hi, Deshaun.
the general manager of King County Metro Transit. It's a tough question, and tip my hat because I got the reference, Gordon Gartrell.
Yes.
But here's the question. What is your generational innovation gift in leadership? And I say that as someone who's old enough to
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, has been posed before about, how are you preparing the workforce for today's generation of workers, where we focus in on a lot on millennials, which have a different, I would say, a different set of perspectives. And sometimes
You have a millennial on a panel. You have a millennial on a panel.
I was saying,
I think we need an intergenerational mentorship here.
But I think the biggest thing is you cannot be so hardened in your approach where you're not nimble to adjust. I think that's the biggest thing. So you have to be open. And like I said, I'm old, but I'm not that old, But I was brought up because I started off in the private industry, and I, working in transportation. I mean, you have to be there every single day. So, I was groomed in that, and that's why I started off with that mindset, saying, "Hey, no, stay to work." And then I had to be comfortable with myself to say that you may need to look at this a little bit differently. And I've taken that opportunity through the pandemic to try to make sure, as we move forward culturally and the changing dynamics with the workforce, that we're not so hardened and, hey, this is the way it's been done forever, so this is the right way. You need to be more adaptable so you can continue to attract and retain highly qualified talent. So that, I would say that would be, it's more of a philosophical approach than any one tactic.
So
So I
that's
would-
one of those competencies, right? When we were asking earlier about competencies, adaptability, change hardiness, the
So-
ability to go with the flow, not being so rigid in your thinking, right? It's a huge competency to cultivate moving forward. Natalie?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that sometimes when we think about how do we make change from one generation to the other, we look at it as how do we stop doing something and replace it with something else. And that's not necessarily what's needed, right? Sometimes it's how do we do what was done before even better and enhance it, right? So for me, the way I look at it is, man, I could do this all day, get claps. Okay, so heart people record this so that like every now and again y'all could just push the button so I could hear claps. But I do think that millennials have something of value to offer. I think I just hired one that is a chief, and he's awesome, right? So I think it's having the acumen to do the job, is having an understanding of what's required. And we have to start, especially on the transit side, and I recognize we have multiple modes in the room, so I apologize for focusing on transit, but we are a not-for-profit mobility business, right? And as we start to have this conversation about being a business, and what does it take to run a business, and we don't have shareholders, but we have customers who are, our shareholders or the community and our stakeholders or whomever they are, and really start making this transition, and how are we as a new not-for-profit business going to stay in business, right? And if having all these new innovative, if you want to call it, approaches to delivering our service doesn't allow us to stay in business, it's not a good business decision. So what I would say for me, I look at it through that lens. If I say everybody stays from home, but then customer services, has all these calls of all these complaints, and I can't find anybody when I need them, and it's probably not me, but the people who need to be found can't be found because they're taking care of their horse, are we really doing the job that we need to be doing, right? And is this a good business decision? And if the answer is no, it is not a good business decision, then I would venture to say you should reassess if that's the best thing to do. If it ends up being yes, it's great for business and everything's going forward and no one is upset, the union is not coming at you, the paper isn't printing stories that are negative, then maybe you do it in a different way. So that would be my 2 cents, if
And
you will.
I'm gonna have to let Adelie's 2 cents be our last word.
Hello, hello? Oh, just wow. Your applause said it all. That was incredible. Thank you so much, Karita, for a wonderfully moderated discussion. Thank you. Thank you to each of these experts on the panel, these high-level transportation professionals, young professionals. Again, thank you, committee members, also COMTO National. There's also a way to keep in touch with the COMTO Emerging Leaders Group on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, there's a COMTO Emerging Leaders Group. Do a search, please follow us. I heard a lot of information that's gonna create content that we will follow up with, put together more webinars, put together more training sessions, so please follow us on LinkedIn. With that said, again, thank you. Let's give them one more round of applause, please. Thank you. And now, so hold on just a second, please, just a minute. So we're going to have some closing remarks from our COMTO president, Ms. April Rye.
Thank you so much. I promise we will not stop you from getting to the drinks. We will make it super quick. I really just want to do one thing, and it might take us a second, but this is so important. Can all the members of the Emerging Leaders Committee come up front and stand here, please? Come up front and stand here. Emerging Leaders Committee members, you need to be seen and recognized, please. This is one phenomenal, dynamic, amazing group of professionals. I want to acknowledge each of them and say I appreciate you, I see you, and this is because of you. Thank you so much for all of your work. With that, before we get into our reception, I want to thank our reception sponsors for our Emerging Leaders Forum reception, and that includes CERM, Parsons, and IEI, Infrastructure Engineering, Inc. And I want to give an opportunity for the representatives of those organizations to come up and just say a few words. Let's start with CERM. I believe we have Dee here and potentially another colleague, or maybe just Dee. Please.
Hello, COMTO family. Before I get started, I want to say good job. I had some questions, but Karita and Aisha cut me off. I almost had some questions for y'all, so y'all got off real good because everybody got their questions out. But no, thank you all for coming to support Emerging Leaders. Just being with this wonderful group of people, I just want to say thank you guys for that. And CERM is also appreciative for everybody being here. So CERM is, I just forgot my train of thought anyways. CERM is a longtime supporter of COMTO. We are a DBE firm, and we have been around for 26 years with an anniversary that is coming up next month. Whoop, whoop. So we do engineering, environmental, and we do PM, CM work. We are grateful to be sponsoring this reception for you guys, and if anybody has any questions for CERM, we will have some marketing material at the reception, and enjoy the drinks. And before I get started, I do have 3 colleagues here, Greg, Shelley, and Janine. Thank you all for your support and for coming. Thank you.
And I do believe we have Aaron Patterson here from Infrastructure Engineering Incorporated. Come right on up.
Thank you very much. It's really, really great to be here in person. You all look wonderful. First off, I'd like to say my name is Aaron Patterson. I'm with Infrastructure Engineering. We also have a couple of other of my colleagues here, Hallie Davis and Stanley Smith. So you want to guys give a quick wave? Thanks. I won't take up too much of your time, but I would like to give you a little bit of information about Infrastructure Engineering. We're a Black-owned civil engineering firm. We provide design and construction management services. We're headquartered in Chicago, but we have offices in Indianapolis, Detroit, New York, and Trenton, New Jersey. So if you do business in any one of those cities, I'm sure I've already tried to track you down. And if I haven't done so yet, I'll make sure I do it by the end of this conference. Our mission statement at IEI is to transform, inspire, and enrich communities by reimagining infrastructure. And I would like to thank Compto for assisting us in achieving that mission by always ensuring opportunities and maximum participation in the transportation industry for minority businesses like Infrastructure Engineering. So it's really truly an honor to be here, and thank you for your time.
And I'm not sure if we have a representative from Parsons in the house. Do we have that representative here from Parsons? Going once, twice? Okay, thank you, Parsons. Okay, we hope you all enjoy the reception happening right now. Thank you so much.
They're still millennials.
next week.